And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. And thank you so much for helping us grow. We hit 1,940 subscribers today, and we grow every day thanks to people like you. So please remember to like our videos and share them. And most important, hit that subscribe button and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. To see our over 300 past episodes, check out our website at www.jasontram.net. Again, that's www.jasontram.net. And our guest today is Amy Sandoval, who is a music educator. She teaches privately, and she also has a podcast called Soundpaint, where she discusses, we're going to talk about that in the show, but musical and recording technology, and it's going to be really interesting to have this conversation. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
A pleasure, and it's been many years since I've seen you. So you actually were a student at Seton Hall where I teach, which is awesome, and it's great to meet people down the road. I just think it's so cool to see what people are up to.
Yeah. I actually wanted to tell a story based on a memory I have of you teaching me, because you're the only professor I had, because I went to Seton Hall for music education, and it's basically like a double major, because there's the education side. You have to learn your psychology and your pedagogy and all of those oddities that go along with being a good teacher and really developing a method that brings impact and change in the student. But then on the other end, you have to really keep your chops up and be able to, work on your skills. And
isn't that the truth? You have to you're trained both sides of the brain, the music part and along with the teacher part, and it's really quite a challenge for music educators.
Yeah, and what I loved about Seton Hall, because I hopped around. I got my associate's degree at a county college, and I was there for a while, and I was working and putting myself through college, and I had ups and downs there. But what I really appreciated, that it was such a real world experience. And then I went on to another 4-year college that I'm not going to mention, wasn't the one I got my degree in. And they were just so soft on you that I was just like, I'm not being challenged here. This isn't like real world introduction at all. And so that's when I switched to Seton Hall. Really amazing professor, Carol Hammersma. She was my guitar teacher at CCM, which was the county college. And she also worked at Seton Hall. And I remember this one time she brought us there for a guitar workshop. And I just had great feelings when I was there. And I just wanted to go back. But anyways, getting back to what I was
shout out to Carol. Carol's a dear friend of mine.
Yes.
Her and her husband are both very dear friends and wonderful professors. And
yeah, her husband, he became my bass professor. And I lovingly tell this story, but I on stage at my senior recital, I thanked him for making me cry on multiple occasions because, that's the real world. It breaks you, and so you really need to be broken, especially if it's something that's that worth it to you. You have to know what your limits are and how to push past them. And I was just, to this day, I'm so grateful for the both of them.
Both incredibly kind. They're both going to be playing for me next Sunday at Ocean Grove. They're both in the. I'm doing an orchestra for a show with a big chorus, and I'll say them. Well, I will definitely do that. That's a small world.
Yeah. But anyways, getting back to where we originally started, you were my only professor at Seton Hall who was the education side and the music side. And I have this story that I have told for years because it meant so much to me, but it also got my brain churning in a way that really has contributed to the way that my business has taken shape. I remember I had bass juries. And for those of you that don't know what a jury is, it's this rigorous exposure of where your skills are at to the whole faculty of music professors and
I always call it the firing squad. Every semester you get in front of the firing squad and you play your pieces, and it's an intimidating process, but I think you grow through that challenge. I think it's we try to make it as friendly as possible, but in the end you have to get up there and play your pieces and show what you've worked on.
You know what, going back to what I said, you gotta, it's trial by fire. You gotta do it. You gotta just deal with it and do it. But I remember this one in particular. I was playing on my electric bass because that was my primary instrument. And I think I was the only electric bass major in the department at that time. And because Stephen Burke, he had to come and as an adjunct professor and teach me. And I was his only student there. And I remember for my juries, he had a prior obligation. He couldn't make it. So I remember I played Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, a Bach piece on the bass. And I believe it's originally supposed to be on the cello. It's a cello piece. And I sat through juries. I listened to the professors give feedback to, flute players, clarinet players, guitar players. And then I get up there. They didn't know what to do. It was just like, I got through it. I played it. I think I, tripped up a little bit, but, ended at the finish line a little bloody and bruised, but I made it. And they had nothing. It was like, I would have taken positive feedback, negative feedback. Absolutely. That's what I wanted. It was just crickets. And they were like, that was something. I've never heard that on the what is that you're playing? That's the electric bass you're playing. And I remember you were there and I tell this story. You were like, yeah, you gave the most feedback. You were like, you said something like that was not something that's typically played on the bass. So that in and of itself was an accomplishment. But then I remember you turned to the other professors and you're like, did you guys notice like a rattling or a rumbling in the closet behind us? They're like, oh yeah, what was that? Yeah, I noticed that. And you're like, that was her. That was those low tones shaking the room. And they were just like, wow, I didn't even know that. And you were talking about how like sound is tangible and the effect that the bass has moving, like physically moving things in the room. And that just stuck with me, and how sound waves can affect people and how they're tangible. And it's not just an oral thing, it's a physical thing. And that just really, like when I talk about in my own podcast, I talk about oscillators, and I love synthesizers a lot. And
did you grow up going to the studio, or did you come from a musical family?
I came from a musical family. My dad was an incredible jazz guitar player. He actually played with Pat Metheny on a couple albums. I can't find them, but there are some tracks where you hear Pat Metheny say, and that's Daryl Ogden on guitar in the background. And he had this incredible guitar. He had a Gibson L5 custom jazz guitar. And I remember I don't remember, but when my mom was pregnant with me, she didn't want to go on vacation, and she wanted him to get this guitar. And so that was what I grew up listening. I grew up listening to him playing guitar. And more so, I remember him coming home because we had a local music store called Keyboard World. And he would go there. He would take me there like almost every day. And he would pick up different amps, different keyboards, like Kurzweils, Rolands. I remember he brought home some DX7s, and he would let me play them. And what he would do is, he was also such a genius electrician, and he would take it apart, and we would have piles of guts of synthesizers and amplifiers and stuff all over my house.
What a great laboratory to kind of explore.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And he would let me play it. And I remember I would just play on it and just listen to the sounds. And I would just laugh and just crack up laughing at these synthesized sounds. I specifically remember the DX7. That was just where I came from. Also, my mom was all classical. She played the piano. She would show me my first, scales and Beethoven pieces and Bach. She loves Bach. I came from a musical background.
Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring is Bach, and it's from one of the cantatas, actually. I think it's cantata number 29, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but But it's such a great melody, and what a great way to to be around this and to have the both the classical and the contemporary and the jazz. How did you gone primarily into the bass? Did you play the guitar as well?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, Carol taught me the guitar. Carol Hammersworth. It's funny because my dad passed away when I was 13, so I didn't really get the opportunity for him to really teach me guitar. He would put it on my lap, and I would kind of like make noises when I was little, but other than that, nothing really. So I remember at CCM, I was actually going to County College of Morris for opera. That was my primary then, and I was meeting with Carol for my electives. And every year my elective was guitar because I liked it so much. But I remember in my first lesson with her, I put it on my lap. I'm like, am I holding it the right way? I'm not even sure of that. And she taught me the classical style of guitar, which is, you have to put I'm right-handed, so I had to put your left knee up on the little pedal or the little step stool thing. You have to play like this, And she was trying to teach me finger picking. And my favorite way to finger pick, and I'm going to like illustrate, was the rest stroke, which basically means that you're alternating these two fingers. And say you're hitting this string, you strike that string and you rest on the string under it. I could not stop doing that. And she tried to get me to move on to using a guitar pick, and I could not do it. And she would watch me. She'd be like, you're playing the guitar like a bass. I think you should try the bass guitar. And that Christmas, my mom got me a really cheap Dean bass, like a student beginner bass for Christmas. And I just fell in love with that. I love how I call it my soulmate instrument, because when I started learning it, I realized how many songs I loved because I loved the bass line. And it was just like meant to be, it was just like a love at first play thing. And
It's amazing how when you find your instrument, I see some really great basses in the back there. What do you have in the back with your instruments?
Oh, this is my Ibanez 5-string.
Ooh.
That's my baby. And this one right here is my Carvin Custom. I took a gamble on that one with on eBay. I paid the guy $1,000, and I said, "Okay, I'll meet you. I'll meet you because he was like local." And I love it. It's fretless. It has an ebony fingerboard that's koa wood, maple neck through. Yeah. Yeah, and then I have she's over there. That's my 4-string X, I call her, because she got me through so many gigs and all of playing at Seton Hall and lugging her across campus and all the looks I got. Like what? Because it's when I put her on my back, it's like so much taller than me. So
love that.
I kind of look like a monster coming in all the time.
So what type of groups do you play with these days? And do you active mix between teaching and performing and then podcasting, and you're building some other interesting ways? So you have all these things going on. What are some of the types of music you like to play?
Oh, gosh. I used to play with a couple different groups before COVID, and just during COVID, I used to be a director for a day program for adults with special needs. I started off as a teacher there, and I really liked how loosely structured it was. I was free to teach them the way I could perceive that they needed to be taught, in the way that worked best for them. And I wasn't, we spoke before a little bit about how in a public school, I felt really restricted, and it
quite
wasn't
regimented. There's a way to do
Very
it. The lesson plans have to be exact. So it's very formal.
And I was homeschooled, so I am used to thinking outside the box, and what's the shortest route from A to B. I don't want to deal with red tape so much. But so working at a day program really was my speed for a little while, but then it turned into a difficult situation. It was difficult with COVID, having to teach virtually. It's difficult because with that population, you really need to be in the room with them. And that was challenging. I was also not seeing eye to eye with my boss for various reasons that I'm not even going to go into. But but also just the world of social work is just really rough, and people burn out all the time. And I was just at a burnout point, and I really realized that now is my opportunity to start my business. And um, like I remember 10 years ago, I was sitting at a cafe, and I had this idea for Soundpaint, and I'm like, I should come up. Originally, it was actually supposed to be a brick and mortar, but I just had this idea of a place where people could go, and it wasn't like, okay, I'm the teacher, you're the student, learn from me. It was like a mutual growth kind of, garden of learning. And I, during COVID, just decided, I'm like, you know what? I understand a little bit about marketing yourself online, and I decided now is just the time. And yeah, so that was how I ended up here. So
That's exciting.
that's
And so
how.
tell us about Soundpaint and where did you get the title and what exactly does that mean and what is your business handle?
Okay, so it's mostly virtual education. I'm actually currently working on going in a slightly different direction in terms of who I want to serve. My target, the group of people that I want to work with, are self-taught musicians who feel insecure because they don't understand what they're doing so much. I am a huge music theory nerd. Like when I was going to County College of Morris, I was like failing theory until I had a tutor, and all of a sudden it was like my brain like was unlocked, and like I felt really good at something for the first time in my life. Really like I can see this from all angles, and I get a little obsessive about music theory. And I work with so many musicians all the time that um like I had this one instance that comes to mind where I was playing in this band, and this guy I was playing with, he was trying to describe to me how he wanted me to play, and he talked my ear off for like 5 or 10 minutes. And I was just like, I'm like, okay, so you want me to play staccato? That's what you want me to do? And he's like, all right, if that's the word for it. I'm like, okay, but you need to know the word. If you knew the word, we could have done this like 5 minutes ago. It was like, I want you to like hit the note, but I don't want you to just hit the note. I want you to like hit the note and then like stop the note before, like, okay, say you're holding the note for like a certain period of time. And I'm like, okay, that's staccato. But like my heart just goes out because music didn't come easy for me. I think it was mostly because I was actually homeschooled and I didn't have like formal education. I was part of a band, and the flute was my first instrument. And I was very like even independent in my reasoning of
Hmm.
how I learned there. Because I was in like a homeschoolers band, and I remember my teacher would be like, tell me like say to like to tap my foot, and he would be like, why aren't you tapping your foot? And I'd be like, because I'm playing the flute. Like little Miss Attitude, 10 years old. And I just like, I've always been the type of person that needed to understand why instead of just be told to do something. And I feel that if more musicians who are self-taught understood what they were doing, understood the reasoning for why they do things the way they do, then it's so empowering. And coming from a place where I struggled personally, like when I was going to County College of Morris, I was like almost tone deaf, like not tone deaf, but like my relative pitch kind of sucked. And, I can be very open about that because I've taught for so long, and I know that people who like, you'd watch them be like, oh my gosh, they're so good. Like, I want to quit. They're so good. Like I'm never going to reach that level. And then like I'd get in a lesson with them and they'd be like, I'm so bad. Like, why am I even going anymore? And, I just have like such a unique perspective. It's so freeing to just be able to honestly say, yeah, I suck sometimes. I do. I still do suck sometimes, but it's
It's great
okay
to get
because
together with people and to let them know that no one's perfect. We all have our issues, and
Mhm.
like for a lot of things I had to work on real hard, boy, in the practice room when I was younger, and I still work on some of these things. It's
Mhm.
just to make sure my skills stay sharp and my score reading stays
Yeah.
sharp. It's a constant struggle.
Yeah, but it's so liberating to be open about that. And that's like part of my unique teaching angle is I'll be like, look, just it's okay. Be terrible, work through it. And I going back to the theory component, knowledge is gives you so much power. And again, just wanting to serve more self-taught musicians and from my I understand that not all people get excited about music theory the way that I do, and that's okay. But I get so excited about it that I can connect the dots and
Sure.
I can explain the reasoning. Like now to like my 10-year-old little self, I could say, no, tap your foot because that's like your gas pedal. Like that's how fast, if you know how fast you're going, and you're not able to handle the curves and the turns. I like to use a lot of analogies when I explain this too.
So good, important for students to get to make that metaphors work for them and to find the right
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. So like
Teaching music is such a mental activity because we need the imagery, we need the kind of to make it personal.
yeah, yeah. And if you're in control of the tempo and the speed, then if you're not able to handle those curves and those turns, that's what the speed limit reduces for. Slow it down, but you're still in control. You still have your foot on the gas, you still have your hands on the wheel, you still can hit the brake, and you know where you are within the framework of what you're doing. And that's just so empowering.
I always find that as a performer, like when I perform, it makes me a better teacher. Do you find that as well?
Hmm. Definitely. And I think it goes both ways. Just from teaching, and observing other people for 15 years, giving one-on-one lessons. Um, it was like my brain had to like solve a problem that I didn't have necessarily, but I saw that they were having, and I'd be like, okay, they're having this problem, but maybe I have this problem too. Maybe I have moments where I have that problem. And it was like in the background of my mind, I would be like solving this problem. I'd be like, and then next time I'd go to play, I'd be like, oh, I did have that problem, but I don't have that problem now because I figured it out on their behalf. And now I can fix that, and all is well.
Nothing like I learn so much every time I teach, and I teach at the college, and always learning. When I teach conducting, I have to reevaluate my conducting and think about it as I'm practicing it in other places. I always think about why do I do it that way, and it forces me to constantly reevaluate my process.
Yeah, I love that. I love there. I've looked it up, but there is a psychology to playing music. And I think that like my whole system of teaching, like I'm a better teacher when it's just one on one. When I can, and I mentioned before we started that I'm very empathetic, and I like to like scan a person and like observe. And I'm like, okay, you're doing this because you're anticipating that, or you're not hearing it coming, or X, Y, and Z. And it's like, oh, that's so interesting. Like like I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who was actually saying that she gets so discouraged like observing people who are so good, and she gets frustrated. But she was saying that she was having an issue with performing, and somebody had actually told her like you're beyond my help, because she actually heard music going the opposite way. And I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating. Like, tell me more. Like, I want to know, like, why is your brain working that way? Not like it's anything to be embarrassed of or ashamed of, but like celebrate it and like, let's explore this. You think you hear music differently.
Absolutely. That's what makes
And
teaching music so interesting is that in music by its nature involves both sides of the brain at the same time.
yeah,
So like you have to the decoding, the reading, the hearing, the audio, oral, the
yeah, but there's a
knowledge base.
psychology to
So
all of
much
it.
to
It's
it.
amazing. Yeah.
So you went into teaching virtually a lot. How do you find students, and do you have students all over the place?
Well, I have a website. It's www.soundpaintacademy.com. And I am a one-man band, so to speak, in terms of my business. I don't I'm not like a very like high tech person, but I am really good at problem solving and figuring things out and teachable. It's the website kind of like a Kajabi or like a Wix, and I built my school from the ground up myself. And it's taken a year to do it, like, because then there's all like the branding and the sales psychology and like all the things that I didn't go to school for. Like, I just want to teach music, but in order to be a business owner, I like was not prepared for everything that comes with it.
You never stop
And
learning, right, as a business owner.
yeah, and it's exhausting, because there's always like a new thing you have to learn, like algorithms and sales funnels. I just signed up for a seminar that's going to teach me how to set up my sales funnel and how to reach my target market. And it's wild. It's a whole lot that I was not prepared for, but you know, here we are.
We're always growing, right? No matter where we
Yep.
are, we're always learning new music when we're growing into new things. And you have so much to bring to these students. That's so exciting. Now, tell us
Yeah.
about the podcast you started as well.
Oh, so the podcast, that's like the thing I get the most excited about. I record it every week, and that was a learning curve too, because I actually have some experience with photography, like setting up the frame of a picture. Um, but videography, not so much. So I had to learn how to capture, the audio within the computer and how to route it out so that I could hear it, and then my voice was going in. So what I do in this podcast, not going to talk about the trials and tribulations of my podcast, but what I do is I I break down trying to like marry art and science and music into very small components, and I talk about oscillators. I mostly focus on synthesizers because, as I mentioned, that's where I find it so fascinating. And if I just want to talk and talk and talk for like, actually my podcasts are pretty short, but if I just want to go off the rails and talk, I will talk about synthesizers because I am so fascinated by them. I don't know so much about them, and I am, again, always learning, but um, it's like one of those things going back to like my dad, like he understood it so well. And
Hmm.
it's like, I'll talk to my mom about modular synthesis and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, yeah, your dad. Oh, yeah. And she'll like finish the sentence of where I was going. I'm like, how do you know that? She's like, that's all your dad ever talked about. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And it like, I'm very much like my dad. So it's kind of a way of reconnecting with him by really learning that part of my identity is in being obsessed about this stuff too. I just kind of missed my opportunity, because, like I had mentioned, he passed away when I was 13. So I kind of missed my opportunity to organically discover my love for it and go to him and be like, oh my gosh, let me tell you everything. And
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
shame
so
that you
this
don't have
is,
opportunity, but I'm very, very proud that you've done this and you're researching and you're bringing it.
yeah.
And it's really cool with the YouTube, a podcast, and with YouTube is you share this knowledge that you learn with everybody, the world. Really,
Mm,
what's it like
yeah.
to have people they enjoy like what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from the feedback I get, they enjoy it. I'm always looking for more feedback because I'm open to, listening to what everybody wants to hear about more so. I went off on this crazy tangent for a while about how color and sound are connected. And I did a whole ton of research, and it was like almost like the art and music connection. And there is it's like a mathematical equation. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, but if you take, say, A440, So those are measured in hertz. And if you multiply that 40 times, you go all the way up into the terahertz range, which is the color spectrum, because sound waves move slower than light waves. And, so it's kind of pseudoscience, but I got really into it. I got obsessed with that for a little while. But I was getting some feedback. They were like, no, I kind of want to hear you go back to talking about like modular synthesis and oscillators. Like that was really cool. That's really where I want to learn.
When were they invented? When do we start with the synthesizer? It was the 50s or the 60s?
I believe it started in like the late 50s, early 60s.
That was the Moog.
The Moog, yeah.
Moog, yeah.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with the Moog, and
that's a really interesting invention because it crosses over from classical to contemporary so easily. And the rock artists embraced it, but so did Philip Cage and the avant-garde, the classical composers. So we have both sides of the contemporary and the popular and the classical kind of embracing the same
and the
technology.
Experimental, like what like Pink Floyd did with it.
Yeah, that was cutting edge at its time, certainly.
My favorite Pink Floyd album is "Wish You Were Here," and I believe the main synthesizer they used there was the Mini Moog, and just the sounds. Oh my gosh! Like, how do you create that sound? I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm studying how, but it's just fascinating. Like, you take like a sawtooth wave or like a sine wave or a square wave, and based on the wave that you choose, you can pair it with a different wave, and it just creates this creature, And
absolutely,
yeah.
Do you have what synthesizers do you use?
I have an Arturia Keylab 88, and I use plugins. I have my eye. It's like $700, but I really want. It's called a Moog DFAM. Drummer from Another Mother is the actual name for it, and I want that so bad. But I also have. I have some, I don't know if you're familiar with the company Rolly.
Yeah, I've heard of them, certainly.
Yeah, so I have this mini Seaboard.
Neat.
Seaboard Rise. And the cool thing is that based on how you press it, it's called 5-dimensional dynamics response. So based on how you press it, it's going to you can get, like, if you hit it lightly, you can kind of get one sound. If you really dig in, you can get a more gritty sound depending on the plugin. But those are my main instruments and my main synthesizers I play with. I also am starting to dabble a little bit in some bass pedals that create a sound with the bass that it sounds like a synthesizer with the bass, like an envelope pedal or a chorus pedal or flangers, some stuff like that.
I'm hearing more and more bass effects on different bands. I always like that.
Yeah, me too. I love that.
Who are some of the bands that influenced you growing up?
Oh my gosh. Well, if we're talking about the bass, I would definitely have to say Jaco Pastorius. Oh my gosh. And going back to the experimental, like the things that he did with a bass, I think it really revolutionized the way that people thought about what a bass's function is. For my senior recital, I learned Portrait of Tracy, which I don't know if you're familiar with it. You have to go back and forth between actually fretting a note and then playing harmonics with your other fingers, which is like you just touch the string so lightly. But it's like within one fret, you can get like 2, sometimes depending on the fret, 3 harmonics out, and those notes were like written into this song. And it was probably one of the more challenging pieces I've ever learned on the bass, because it's like acrobatics, and just like watching him was just it's just like art in motion. And it's so, for the bass, he is a huge inspiration. Also more contemporary, but Esperanza Spalding. She's just like, I think that she really continues on in that experimental, bass driven,
pushing that envelope, right?
Yeah, pushing that envelope. Yeah. Also, my dad listened to Pink Floyd all growing up, so that's where a lot of the synthesized sounds come in. And Vangelis, Blade Runner is like one of my favorite movies, and I
Which one?
love just
The reboot or the original?
the original, but
Of
the
course.
reboot, I'm quite happy with what they did with the reboot. Or the not a reboot. It's just like part two. But I just Vangelis was just incredible, and out there in the beginning, pioneering those sounds, those synthesized sounds. And so yeah, I
Powerful.
mean, there's a lot of people that I'm inspired by, not just jazz and experimental, but classical. Like I love Mozart. I love his. There's a quote by him. I'm just paraphrasing it, but he said that like he wanted his music to be appealing to the common man. So like any farmer walking through his field could be whistling his songs. And I just love that spirit of like music is for the people, not like the elite. And um, what else? I love jazz. I love Coltrane. Some Weather Report, but that's going back to
Oh
Jaco.
yeah.
And yeah, yeah. Some Wayne
I'm just fascinated
Shorter.
when we talk about we were talking about sound and then visuals and how it connects. What do you think about kinesthesia, where there's people who
Oh,
hear colors in their sound, and it's like a medical condition. Like some of the great composers were kinesthesia people. I'm just
mm,
so fascinated by this connection between color and sound and kind of the way they heard it. It's just fascinating to me.
yeah, yeah. I actually was just talking in one of my podcasts about Kandinsky, who was a painter. He
Right.
was an abstract painter. Um, and my sister and my mom were both, in terms of like the art, they've been huge inspirations to me too, because I'm not like a visual artist. I mean, like I do photography, but I'm just capturing something that's already there. But my mom, she's like a jewelry designer, and she did like my engagement ring, and just I grew up with her art and talking about sculpture and stuff like that. And then my sister, she's a fashion designer, and the two of them talk about painters all the time and stuff like that. So it just like kind of bled into me as well. And that's also where the paint in the sound comes also. But going back to Kandinsky, I think that he had synesthesia,
He did.
because
That's right.
he would talk about a lot about how there's this really cool video. I forget the channel. Um, I want to say it's called like Listen Now or something like that. But this guy did this whole video about talking about the different colors that Kandinsky would see with different instruments. And like a deep blue was like a double bass.
Hmm.
And, so like I actually, in one of my podcasts, I'm like, okay, in honor of like Kandinsky, I'm going to like play the double bass. And this represents like a dark blue. So I'm going to like play notes that are like a dark blue in nature. And um, I think he said like green was like the middle notes of a violin. And I could be messing that up, but and then
I'm
like
always
trumpet was
fascinated by
like
how they
red.
hear it. Yeah, I certainly it's different too. It's not the same with everyone. Like Scriabin was one
Mm,
who had similar. I heard that Sibelius might be one. So it's very interesting
yeah,
to see. I'm sure
yeah,
there's
but like
probably
look how
different.
abstract they wrote their music.
Ligeti is another one. So it's just fascinating that how that informs their sound. I guess this hypersensitivity to colors and
Mm.
sound and
Yeah, from
very
what I mean,
fascinating.
I've never known anybody who actually had synesthesia, but from what I hear, it's actually kind of a painful thing. Um, but I don't know. I mean, like I kind of envy it, but I don't know what it's like to actually have it. But I think it's super cool.
Different way of perceiving. I guess it's all different.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's like, the human experience. Like, how do you perceive color? How do you perceive sound? And I just think that, we're creative creatures, and to create and make a song based on that sound it's just us expressing our perspective of how we hear things, how we see things. And that's really just the human connection right there.
I love that. Just such a connecting thing what music does. It has the ability to unite and inspire and to heal the world, and that's why we all go into music, and that kind of need to kind of teach people what we love and to bring that to the next generation.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
something that maybe COVID taught you about yourself? What was something you may have learned during the COVID period?
That's a good question. Mm, I think it taught me more than anything to take action, because I'm the type of person that's like, I'll wait, I'll wait for the right timing. I'll wait for the right opportunity. And it was kind of, it kind of made it easy to be like, no, I'm going to just do it now. But it also showed me how much, like, I really believe in timing is important, but at the same time, you can get so hung up on waiting for the timing to be perfect that you never take action. And I think that what it really taught me was that you need to not get complacent in thinking, oh, I'm waiting for the timing. I'm waiting for the timing. I'm waiting for the timing. And you have to start asking yourself, wait, no, wake up. Is this the time? Is this the time? Oh, this is the time. I should be moving.
That's a great lesson to teach people, because so many people, they second guess themselves, they doubt themselves, and it's such a great, it's a great lesson for students, for anyone really, is to take that risk, to get out there and to, take that chance, because you never know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, definitely.
Where can people go to find out more about you and your work, and tell us about where we can go see your podcast? I believe it's also on YouTube.
Yep.
Awesome.
So you can find, because I also do music courses. Like, I do one-on-one lessons, and that you can find through my website, but you can also find my music courses, which I am going to be releasing a course. I had mentioned music courses for music theory for self-taught musicians. So that I am currently working on. That's not available yet. But, if you want to stay in touch, you can absolutely go to my website at www.soundpaintacademy.com. And I already have a few pre-recorded courses on there that are available. Some songwriting courses for beginner musicians. If you feel that you don't necessarily want to learn songs, you just want to learn your instrument and then learn how to write music, if that's the route you want to go, because it's more often than not that people want to pick up an instrument and learn their favorite song. But I love just people who don't really want to do that. They just want to create their own thing. And that course is meant for them, because it's simulteaching. New word. No, just kidding. It's simultaneously teaching people how to play an instrument, and just different, like, what's a whole note, what's a half note, what's a quarter note, and just laying a really solid foundation and groundwork. But at the same time, I walk you through several exercises based on only using 3 different notes, because I really strongly believe that creativity flourishes when you get bored. And if you only have 3 notes to work with, you're going to get bored, especially if you're a beginner and you don't want to be overwhelmed, because I'd rather people be bored than overwhelmed. Because when you're bored, your brain starts thinking, okay, what else can I do with this? And I think that creativity can really flourish in those conditions. So that course is called, so that course is called Simple Songwriting with 3 notes for beginners. So that you can find that on my website as well. As for my podcast, I am currently, I'm not on Spotify yet, but I am on Apple Music, and you can find my podcast 2 different ways. Well, 3 different ways. You can, sorry, my brain just went 3 different ways. You can look me up on Apple Music. It's called Soundpaint and then a colon, and it's called Sonic Exploration because that's just like the nature of that. Like we're just kind of exploring sound, like, we're adventurers. And you can also, I have another website. It's called www.soundpaint. My mind went blank. What is that website?
I've got soundpaint.teachable.com.
No, that's not it.
Are they linked to your website?
Gosh. Oh, yeah. No, I know what it is. I just have to find it. All right.
People can get on your mailing list on your website and get all this.
You can get on my mail. If you get on my mailing, if you are on my mailing list through www.soundpaintacademy.com, then I'll send you my podcast every week once you're on that mailing list.
Fantastic.
And I do them every Saturday, except for today, because it was actually my husband's and my 3-year anniversary. So
happy anniversary.
We took a few days. Thank you. So we took a few days to just relax. And because he's also my video editor, and he's an amazing video editor, and he keeps trying to push me to edit my own videos, but he's so good that
quite a talented guy. He's also a very good tenor and singer and dancer.
Yeah, that's right. You know him too.
I got to see him quite a lot. I was like, that's pretty amazing. What a small world.
Yeah, it was so wild when he came home and he's like, "Hey, I one of the people I'm working with, I think you were the executive producer for that show."
Yeah, I'm the new executive director of that company that produced that show, and that was a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a great show. So my for those of you listening, my husband was in the show In the Heights, and so he comes home and he's like, "Hey, so I'm working with this guy who was a professor in the music department at Seton Hall." I'm like, "No way! I probably know him because it's a pretty small department."
Small. Yep.
Pretty small. I hear that actually started off. It was like in a trailer when it started, like decades ago, but that's for another story. And he told me the name. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "Tell him I said hi. Ask him if he remembers me."
What year did you graduate, if I may ask?
2013. It was 2013, but it took me like 10 years to put myself through college. So it felt like it was just going to be indefinite. Just I was going to be in school forever.
Yeah, well, everyone's got that different path, and they study. We all go different ways, and yours is certainly unique and interesting, and you're doing some great work. So keep it up, and I encourage people to go check out the work of the Soundpaint Academy and Amy's work, and check out her podcast because she's doing some really good thinking.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
It was such a pleasure to catch up again, and wish you all the best, and my best to your husband as well, and happy anniversary, 3 years.
Thank you.
It's great to have talented people together, right, and on that journey.
Absolutely. You want to surround yourself with those people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and wish you continued success, and I'll stay in touch.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe, smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. And we're going to be taking a week off and jumping back in September, full force into podcasting again. But thank you so much for supporting our podcast and watching. And remember, keep music alive.